The night I almost died started like the kind of evening where you think the worst thing that can happen is a bad kiss. I was wrong. Turns out, the worst thing that can happen is being ambushed by men who want you gone, and the only one who saves you is a stranger with a badge and a gun. I should have known something was off. The dating app photo was too perfect, too polished, like it was cropped straight out of a magazine ad. But after weeks of loneliness, I ignored the warnings buzzing in the back of my skull. Maybe I wanted to believe someone out there could want me. Just me, in all my messy, unfiltered existence. The restaurant was tucked away in a corner of downtown Chicago, one of those places where the lights were low and the menus were overpriced. I waited, staring at the door, my stomach knotting with every passing minute. When Ethan, the man from the app, finally appeared, I almost laughed at myself, because he wasn't Ethan. And he wasn't alone. That's when the chaos began. A table overturned, a glass shattered, hands reached for me, rough and fast, and I felt the sharp pull of panic claw up my throat. And then him, the cop. He appeared like some kind of reckless miracle, charging in from the street with his weapon drawn. His uniform shirt was half untucked. His jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth would break. He didn't hesitate, not for a second, before grabbing me by the wrist and hauling me behind him. "Stay down," he barked, his voice low and commanding, like thunder you couldn't ignore. I couldn't even breathe, let alone argue. My heart hammered as he fired a warning shot into the ceiling, scattering the ambushers. Screams filled the restaurant, chairs scraped across the floor, and before I could comprehend any of it, I was being dragged into the night air, my lungs burning with shock and cold. That was the moment my life split in two. Before him and after him. His name was Ryan Carter, and he wasn't supposed to be there. Off duty, he said later. Wrong place, wrong time, except maybe not. Because the more I learned, the more it seemed like fate had shoved him into my path on purpose. We ran. God, we ran through back alleys and across empty streets, his hand never once letting go of mine. The sirens screamed in the distance, not all of them friendly. Whoever wanted me dead had power, connections, and money. Ryan didn't say it out loud, but the grim look in his eyes told me enough. If we stopped, I was done for. "Why are you helping me?" I asked breathlessly when we finally ducked into the shadow of an abandoned warehouse. My chest heaved, sweat trickling down my temple, but he looked like stone, unshakable. "Because I couldn't let them take you," he answered simply. No hesitation, no explanation, just that. And I hated how much those words lodged themselves inside me, warm and terrifying at the same time. The first night we hid together was a strange kind of intimacy I wasn't prepared for. The warehouse was cold, the wind slicing through broken windows. Ryan shrugged off his jacket and tossed it at me, then leaned against the wall like he'd done this 100 times before. I wrapped myself in the warmth of his jacket, inhaling the faint scent of leather, coffee, and something sharper I couldn't name. I watched him as he kept watch, his eyes scanning the shadows, his hand never straying far from his holster. "Do you even know who those men were?" he asked suddenly. I shook my head, my voice catching. "I thought I was going on a date." He exhaled sharply, a mix of frustration and pity. "Then we've got bigger problems. They weren't after your wallet." His gaze met mine, intense and unwavering. And for the first time that night, I wasn't just scared of the men chasing May, was scared of the way he looked at me, like I was worth saving. We spent the next days moving from place to place, a rhythm of hiding and running, like fugitives in a city that no longer felt like home. I should have broken down, should have given up, but Ryan was the kind of man who anchored you without meaning to. He never promised I'd be Sophie, wasn't foolish enough for that. Instead, he gave me something else, presence. Unshakable, stubborn presence. One night, as we sat huddled in the back of an old car he'd hotwired, I whispered, "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he replied. "Enough for what?" His jaw tightened. "Enough to not let you go." And I swear, in the dark of that car, with only the hum of the city beyond the glass, I almost leaned in. Almost. But the truth was, I didn't know if he was saving me because it was his duty, or because God help Mayhay actually cared. Yet the city wasn't going to let us disappear quietly. Every corner we turned, every shadow we crossed, the threat grew louder. And the deeper we ran, the more tangled we became in danger, in trust, in something I couldn't name. Because somewhere between the ambush and the hiding, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just running for my life anymore. I was running toward him. The city didn't sleep, but for us, it felt like we were ghosts moving through its veins. Ryan led with the quiet precision of a man who had done this before, slipping us through alleys, avoiding cameras, steering me with the pressure of his hand at the small of my back. Every time his touch anchored me, I fought the urge to crumble against him. I didn't want to be weak. Not in front of him. Not when everything inside me screamed to break apart. We ended up in a motel on the outskirts, one of those places where the curtains never fully close and the walls smell like smoke from decades past. Ryan insisted on taking the bed closest to the door, his gun resting on the nightstand within reach. I curled on the far side, trying to close my eyes, but the weight of the day pinned me wide awake. I listened to his breathing, steady, controlled, not asleep. "Do you trust me yet?" he asked quietly, his voice cutting through the dark. I swallowed. My throat was dry. "You saved my life. Isn't that enough?" "Not always," he murmured. I turned, meeting the faint outline of his face in the dim light. "Why? Why are you still here? You could have left me. This isn't your fight." His silence stretched long enough that I thought he wouldn't answer. But then, softly, like confessing a sin, he said, "Because I've seen too many people left behind. Not this time." Something in my chest cracked open at that. I wanted to say something, "Thank you, don't stop, stay," but the words tangled. Instead, I stared at him until exhaustion finally dragged me under. The next morning, Ryan was already up, already scanning. His uniform jacket was gone, replaced with a hoodie and jeans he'd somehow pulled from the duffel bag in his trunk. He looked younger that way, less like the cop who had stormed into my nightmare and more like a man I could have met anywhere, in a bus, in a coffee shop, in another life where bullets weren't waiting for us. "We need to move," he said. His tone was clipped, efficient, but his eyes softened when they fell on me. "You good to run? I don't really have a choice, do I?" I tried for a smile, but it came out thin. "You always have a choice," he said. "That's what they're trying to take from you. Don't let them." Those words burned into me. Choice. As if I had ever felt like I owned my own life. As if right now, with him, I could. We spent the day weaving through the city's underbelly subway tunnels, forgotten industrial blocks, pockets of quiet where the world seemed to pause. Ryan's instincts were razor sharp. Every time I thought we'd been caught, he'd pivot, his hand locking around mine, pulling me out of sight just in time. But the chase took its toll. By the time we ducked into an abandoned church, I was shaking, my legs threatening to collapse. Ryan guided me to a pew, his hand steady on my shoulder. "Breathe," he said firmly, crouching in front of me. His eyes, storm gray and relentless, pinned me in place. "In. With me." I obeyed because I couldn't do anything else. Slowly, the panic ebbed. Slowly, I realized how close he was. His hand brushed mine, whether by accident or not, I didn't know. I didn't pull away. "Why me?" I whispered, the question that had haunted me since the ambush. "Why are they after me?" Ryan's jaw tightened. He hesitated, then leaned closer. "Because you were in the wrong place. Because someone thinks you saw something. And because power doesn't need a reason to destroy you." The bitterness in his voice startled me. This wasn't just about me. He knew something, had seen something, maybe too much. "Ryan," I breathed, my chest aching. "What are you not telling me?" His eyes flickered, and for a moment I thought he would finally let me in. But then he shook his head. "Later. Right now, we just keep breathing." But the way his hand lingered against mine told me more than his words ever could. Night fell heavy again. We made a small fire in the church's cracked hearth, its glow painting his face in shifting shadows. I sat beside him, closer than I should have dared. He didn't move away. "Do you ever wish you could walk away from all of this?" I asked. His lips twisted in a half-smile. Every damn day. And yet you don't. Because if I walk away, he said, voice low, someone else doesn't get a chance to run. Someone like you. The silence after that was thick, electric. I felt his shoulder brush mine, and the warmth of him seeped into my skin, chasing away the chill. I wanted to lean in, to see if the firelight would reveal what he was holding back. But before I could, glass shattered somewhere outside. Ryan was on his feet in an instant, gun drawn, eyes snapping to me with a command I couldn't disobey. Stay behind me. The moment between us broke. And once again, survival demanded more than our hearts could afford. We slipped out the back of the church, the sound of boots crunching in the distance. Whoever was after us hadn't given up. They were hunting. Relentless. We ran again, lungs burning, the city swallowing us whole. At one point, in the narrow gap between two crumbling buildings, Ryan pressed me against the wall, his arm shielding me as footsteps passed within inches. His body was so close I could feel every breath, every tremor of tension in him. And for a single, reckless second, I forgot the danger. I tilted my head up, met his eyes. He froze. His lips parted, as if words might come, as if then the footsteps faded. And Ryan tore his gaze away, pushing us forward, refusing to let that second claim us. But it was too late. The moment lived inside me now, undeniable. By the time we reached the edge of the city, exhaustion clung to every step. Ryan found us shelter in an old cabin by the river, abandoned but standing. Inside, the dust and silence wrapped around us like a fragile kind of safety. I sank onto the floor, too tired to think, too wired to sleep. Ryan sat across from me, back against the wall, watching me in that way he always did, like he was memorizing my edges, my scars, my fear. You okay? He asked. No, I admitted. But I will be. Because of you. His expression faltered, just for a heartbeat. And in that crack, I saw the weight he carried, the want he buried. Ryan Carter, the man who saved me, was breaking too. And maybe, just maybe, he needed me as much as I needed him. The silence of the cabin was almost unbearable. It wasn't the silence of safety, it was the silence before a storm. The kind that pressed against your skin until you could barely breathe. Ryan sat against the far wall, his gun within reach, eyes locked on me as though I were both his burden and his anchor. I couldn't stop watching him. His chest rose and fell with slow precision, his jaw tight, his every muscle tuned for fight or flight. But in the cracks, I saw the man underneath. Tired, scarred, holding himself together with sheer force of will. And God, I wanted to reach across the floor, close that distance, press my forehead to his and whisper, "You don't have to carry this alone." But I didn't, because survival demanded restraint. Because he was a cop and I was just me. Instead, I asked, "What are you not telling me?" He looked away, and that silence stretched like a blade between us. Finally, he said, "You ever hear the saying, sometimes the truth can get you killed?" I swallowed hard. "So you're saying if I knew, I'd be dead already?" He met my gaze again, and something flickered in his eyes. "I'm saying I'm not ready to put that weight on you. Not yet." It was infuriating, but I also understood. Some truths were too heavy to hand over when you were barely holding yourself together. That night, the storm came. Not the kind with rain and thunder, but the kind with boots and bullets. We were asleep, or at least I was, when the first crack of glass shattered the air. Ryan was on me in an instant, yanking me off the floor and pushing me behind the overturned table he'd somehow had the foresight to wedge against the wall earlier. "Stay down." His voice was sharp, commanding, but his hand brushed mine for just a second reassurance in the chaos. The door slammed open. Shadows flooded the cabin. Muffled voices barked orders. Ryan moved like a force of nature, rolling, firing, keeping low. Each shot echoed through the wood. Each flash of light seared against my eyes. I curled behind the table, useless, trembling, trying not to make a sound. But then the table jolted as a bullet tore through it, splintering wood inches from my head. A scream ripped from my throat before I could stop it. Damn it! Ryan cursed, shoving me deeper into cover. Stay with me. The firefight felt endless, like time itself was holding its breath. But then silence. Just the sound of my own ragged breathing. Ryan crouched, gun still raised, scanning the doorway. Bodies shifted in the shadows, groans from wounded men. Whoever had sent them hadn't expected him to fight like hell. Finally, he lowered the weapon, his chest heaving. We need to move. Now. We stumbled out into the night, the forest swallowing us whole. My legs shook with every step, but Ryan's hand never left me. He kept glancing back, scanning, calculating. When we finally slowed near the riverbank, I collapsed onto the damp grass, my lungs screaming. Ryan knelt in front of me, his hand gripping my shoulder. Are you hurt? I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. No, just scared out of my mind. His hand lingered, his thumb brushing against my collarbone before he seemed to realize it and pulled back. But in that fleeting touch, everything inside me shifted. Because he wasn't just protecting me out of duty anymore. He cared. And the worst part? So did I. By dawn, we'd put miles between us and the cabin. The river was our guide, carrying us further from the city. Ryan led us to a fishing shack hidden by trees, where we finally collapsed in relative safety. I watched as he stripped off his hoodie, sweat clinging to his shirt, muscles taut from the fight. He sat heavily, rubbing his face with both hands. For the first time, he looked breakable, and I couldn't hold it back anymore. You can't keep doing this alone, I said softly. He looked up, startled. I don't know what you're carrying, or who those men are, or why they want me gone. I continued, voice trembling but firm. But I know this, you can't protect me and destroy yourself at the same time. That's not how this works. Something in his face cracked then. A flicker of pain, raw and unguarded. I was supposed to testify, he admitted, voice low, against men in my own department. Dirty cops. They killed witnesses, covered up crimes. I was next, and then you walked into the wrong place at the wrong time. You weren't supposed to see any of it, but you did, which means now you're part of it. And they'll never stop until we're both gone. The truth slammed into me like a tidal wave. Suddenly, it all made sense, the ambush, the endless chase, the way Ryan moved like a man with nothing left to lose. And yet, instead of fear, what I felt most was relief. Relief that he finally let me see him. I crawled closer, closing the gap until I was right in front of him. Then we don't run separately. We run together. He stared at me, searching my face for hesitation, for doubt. But I had none left. For the first time, Ryan Carter let out a shaky breath, like he'd been holding it for years. And in that quiet shack, with the river murmuring outside, his forehead dropped to mine. No kiss, not yet. Just the raw, desperate closeness of two men holding onto each other when the world wanted them gone. That moment changed everything. The fear didn't disappear. The danger didn't vanish. But something inside both of us shifted from survival to something fiercer. We weren't just running anymore. We were fighting. Because love, even the kind born in shadows and blood, was still love. And it was worth running for. The fight for our lives came to a head on the third night. We thought we'd put enough distance between us and the men hunting us. But the illusion shattered with the sound of roaring engines cutting across the lonely stretch of road. Headlights pierced the dark, and Ryan's hand clamped down around mine before I even registered the danger. They found us, he muttered, his jaw a hard line of determination. The SUVs screeched to a stop, doors flying open, armed men spilling out with guns gleaming under the moonlight. And among them I saw the badge, a Chicago PD insignia, clear as day. My stomach turned to ice. Ryan, I whispered, terror rising. They're cops. No, he growled, his grip tightening. They're predators hiding behind a badge. It was then I understood this wasn't just about me or him. This was rot that went all the way to the core, men who had turned the law into a weapon. Ryan stepped in front of me, his stance wide, protective. Stay behind me, he said, voice steady even though the odds were impossible. "You'll get killed." His eyes flicked back to me, fierce and unflinching. "If I fall, you run. Don't look back." But something inside me snapped at his words. Not because I didn't believe him, but because I refused to let him sacrifice himself for me. Ryan moved like a storm, taking cover, returning fire with deadly precision. But there were too many of them. One man lunged toward me, dragging me from behind, a gun pressing to my ribs. Panic flared, but before I could scream, Ryan's shot rang out. The man crumpled, and Ryan was there, hauling me back into his chest, his breath ragged in my ear. "I told you," he whispered fiercely. "I'm not letting them take you." The words sent a shiver down my spine, a promise carved into the marrow of me. We fought together, ducking, scrambling, clawing our way through the madness. At one point, Ryan shoved a pistol into my hands, his fingers steady around mine. "You ever shoot?" I shook my head, trembling. "Then tonight you learn. Keep it pointed low, steady. Don't think just survive." It wasn't courage that kept me steady. It was him. Every glance, every touch, every word anchoring me when I should have been unraveling. By the time the dust settled, the highway was littered with twisted cars and groaning bodies. Smoke curled into the night sky. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of my own heartbeat. Ryan staggered, blood streaking his arm where a bullet had grazed him. I rushed to him, catching his weight before he could fall. "Ryan," I gasped, panic clawing at me. "You're bleeding." "I've had worse," he gritted out, but his knees buckled, and I lowered him carefully to the ground. The red-blue glow of sirens flickered in the distance. Backup. For them or us, I couldn't tell. "This is it," Ryan said, his eyes locking on mine. "If we don't finish this now, they'll hunt us forever." Fear tore at me, but love raw, unshakable love overpowered it. "Then we finish it. Together." The final stand came fast. Another squad descended, led by the very man Ryan had once called broth-era decorated sergeant, now unmasked as the heart of the corruption. His face twisted with contempt as he stepped forward. "You should have kept quiet, Carter," he sneered. "Now you'll die with your little boyfriend here." The slur cut, but Ryan didn't flinch. Instead, he pulled himself to his feet, standing tall despite the blood on his shirt. "You made a mistake," Ryan said coldly. "You thought fear would keep me quiet, but you forgot fear can make a man louder than you ever imagined." What happened next blurred into fire and fury. Shots cracked, men screamed, and in the chaos, Ryan and I fought not just for survival, but for each other. Every move, every desperate grab for cover, every bullet hit was no longer just defense. It was defiance. And when the last man fell, when the sergeant lay cuffed on the asphalt, bleeding and cursing, Ryan finally collapsed into my arms, trembling with exhaustion. The real sirens arrived, then true officers, not the traitors who had hunted us. They swept in, guns drawn, only to pause at the sight of Ryan's badge and the wreckage around us. It was over. Hours later, as the sun rose over the horizon, painting the highway in gold, I sat beside him in the back of an ambulance. His arm was bandaged, his body battered, but his hand never once let go of mine. "You okay?" he asked, his voice hoarse. I laughed through the tears spilling down my cheeks. "You're the one bleeding out, and you're asking if I'm okay?" He squeezed my hand, his lips curving in that stubborn, impossible smile. "Guess that's my thing now. Looking out for you." My throat tightened. I wanted to tell him everything, how terrified I'd been, how much I hated and loved every second of this nightmare, how somewhere along the way he'd become the only thing that mattered. So I did. "I love you," I whispered, the words breaking free like they'd been waiting all along. His eyes widened, then softened, all the walls crumbling at once. "God, I was hoping you'd say that." And then, finally, after all the running, all the fear, all the blood and fire, kissed. Not desperate, not rushed, just the slow, aching kiss of two men who had survived the impossible and found something worth living for. Weeks later, the trials began. Ryan's testimony tore through the corruption like a blade, dragging hidden crimes into the light. It wasn't easy. He was branded a traitor, threatened, vilified, but he stood tall. And every time he faltered, I was there, his hand in mine, reminding him that he wasn't fighting alone. We moved into a small apartment overlooking the river. It wasn't much, but it was ours. The sound of the water at night lulled us to sleep, a reminder of the place where we'd finally stopped running. Some nights, Ryan would wake shaking, nightmares clinging to him. I'd hold him until his breathing evened out, whispering the same words he once gave me, "Breathe, in, with me." Other nights, I'd catch him watching me, his gaze soft, reverent, like he still couldn't believe I was real. And I'd smile, because I knew exactly how he felt. We had been forged in fire, baptized in fear, and carried out by love. And in the end, it wasn't just survival we found. It was each other. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.